Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, if you're building a startup today, we're unpacking a really crucial lesson for you. Exactly why Kodak failed. Look, we all want to build a brand so ubiquitous that it literally becomes a cultural touchstone, right? And for decades, Kodak had exactly that. Everyone knew what a Kodak moment was. But how did the undisputed kings of photography completely lose their crown? To really wrap our heads around the scale of their dominance, let that number sink in for just a second. 90%. That is the staggering market share Kodak held at its absolute peak. For any startup founder building today, capturing 90% of your market is, well, it's almost an unfathomable level of success. It creates this highly lucrative monopoly where you own the entire ecosystem. I mean, everyone bought their cameras, which meant everyone had to buy their film, and everyone paid to have that film developed. It was just a brilliant, endlessly repeating revenue loop.
But that brings us to a really fascinating question. How exactly does a monopoly just die? How does a company with all the cash, all the brand recognition, and absolute market dominance suddenly collapse? It's so easy to assume, they just got too slow or they were blindsided by some brand new technology from a scrappy group of engineers in a garage somewhere. But the truth? The truth is actually a whole lot more surprising and honestly a lot more relevant for anyone trying to scale a business today. So in the 1970s, Kodak had this unbeatable film monopoly. And decades later, in 2012, they filed for bankruptcy. But the dramatic irony, the real kicker here, lies right in that middle date, 1975. That is the exact year a Kodak engineer named Steven Sasson successfully invented the very first digital camera prototype. Think about that. They weren't blindsided by digital photography. They didn't miss the technological wave at all. They literally held the blueprint for the next century in their own R&D labs, decades before going bankrupt. They stood utterly still while literally holding the future in their hands. When Steven Sasson proudly presented this groundbreaking digital breakthrough, management's reaction was famously, dismissive. They told him, "That's cute, but don't tell anyone." No way, right? They looked at a technology that didn't require film, and instead of seeing the future of their entire industry, they only saw a threat to their cash cow. For all you founders out there, let this serve as a massive warning. The dangerous arrogance of hiding the future just to protect your legacy revenue streams is a real thing, and it's deadly. What we're looking at here perfectly illustrates the mechanics of a famous business theory you've probably heard of, the innovator's dilemma. It's basically this fatal trap where a highly successful company aggressively protects its established, high-margin products instead of embracing the disruptive new technologies that are inevitably going to replace them. Seeing the future simply isn't enough. Even inventing the future isn't enough. The innovator's dilemma proves that if your leadership team lacks the courage to cannibalize your own successful products, someone else out there is happily going to do it for you. Think about the sheer disparity here. You've got the towering, incredibly lucrative high margins of traditional film stacked right up against this tiny, low-margin, completely unproven digital threat. This is the classic high-margin trap. Put yourself in the shoes of a CEO looking at these numbers. It becomes incredibly difficult to justify diverting resources away from massive, guaranteed profits just to fund a low-margin digital prototype that fundamentally destroys your main business. It completely paralyzes decision-making. So how should a company actually react? Well, Fujifilm is the ultimate foil here. They were Kodak's biggest rivals, staring down the exact same digital cliff. But while Kodak stood entirely still, fiercely protecting legacy film straight into bankruptcy, Fujifilm actively embraced the disruption. They looked at their core competencies, specifically their deep expertise in complex chemicals, and they bravely pivoted. They took that chemical expertise and applied it to totally new industries, like cosmetics and healthcare. The result? Fujifilm survived and thrived because they were willing to morph, while Kodak remained totally rigid, which reveals absolutely the most crucial lesson of all. Technology wasn't the enemy. Business model rigidity was. Industry disruption itself doesn't actually kill startups or incumbents. What absolutely destroys companies is stubbornly clinging to an outdated business model. Kodak's digital camera was brilliant technology, but they couldn't figure out a way to make it fit into their existing model, so they shelved it. They let their legacy business dictate their technology, instead of letting new technology evolve their business. So, as modern founders, how do we avoid this? Well, here's a quick roadmap. First, audit your current revenue streams for vulnerabilities. You need to know exactly where your cash cow might suddenly become a liability. Second, actively embrace the mindset of self-cannibalization. If a better, cheaper way to serve your customers exists, you need to build it before your competitor does. even if it temporarily eats into your current profits. And third, fund the very technology that threatens your dominance. Put your absolute smartest people on the projects that scare you the most.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really memorable, hard-hitting question to challenge your own strategic blind spots. Ready? What product are you too afraid to build for fear of cannibalizing your own revenue? I want you to think deeply about this right now. What is the one disruptive idea your team has floated that you immediately shut down because it would mess up your current metrics? Because that right there, that's your blind spot. That is your 1975 digital camera. Spark that reflection today so you don't become the next cautionary tale tomorrow. Keep building, keep innovating, and hey, thank you for joining me to unpack this fascinating lesson.